Share your path that your family took to get to Amache. So, for example, you had actually already told me how your parents, and it says, was your family ever separated? Were you at other camps? And why did you move?
Bomb Pearl Harbor, that's when it started on December 7, 1941. I was in a grammar school, and we heard about it on radio. We didn't have TVs. And so that was terrible. After that, a few weeks after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, I was going to elementary school in Campbell Elementary School near San Jose. And a few weeks later, after the bombing, the kids started calling us names, and like the term dirty Japs is what I remember. They used to call me, the little kids, mostly boys, in my class and other classes. And during recess, they used to call us names and razz us, and I was scared. So I didn't want to go to school anymore in elementary school. And then I used to be scared because sometimes they would chase us home. Some boys would get rocks and start chasing us home from elementary school. I had to run down the street to a creek and try to walk home instead of riding a bus, because when I rode the bus, they would make fun of us. They called us dirty Japs and everything. I complained to the bus driver, and he wouldn't do anything about it. He felt sorry for me. And then I told my teacher about it, elementary teacher, and she said it was terrible, but she didn't do anything about it either. So I was dreadful. My sister and I didn't want to go to elementary school. So we used to walk home, and I thought, I don't want to ride the bus anymore. We walked down the creek and tried to walk home 3 miles to our house. And then the boys were throwing rocks at us from the cliff while we were running home from elementary school on this creek, had 30-foot high cliff. And the boys were calling dirty Japs and throwing rocks, and my sister and I started running down the creek and to walk home and sneak up another road and back to our house 3 miles away. And the boy fell off the cliff, and my sister said, "Oh, he fell off the cliff. You better go help him." I said, "No, the other boys are there." I said, "We better leave. We're afraid." So anyway, we finally walked all the way home, and I cried to my father and mother, "I don't want to go to school anymore." My sister did the same, and we told them about the boy that fell off the cliff. And to this day, I still don't know what happened to that boy. I feel so guilty about it, but I was too afraid to go back, and see if he was okay. I suppose falling off a 30-foot cliff, is very dangerous. But anyway, I feel kind of ashamed about that, but I still remember it. But when I went home, I told my father, who spoke Japanese, "I don't want to go to school anymore." My father yelled at me, "Gakko ni ikemasa." He told me Japanese, I had to go to school, so I dreaded it, but we kept going to school. And when executive order was signed by President Roosevelt, February 14th, 1942, and we got a 2-week notice to move, I was glad. I said, "Oh boy, I don't have to go to school anymore." And I didn't know any better. I said, "Oh boy." And so the Santa Clara County Sheriff Department came down to our house in a ranch where we had berry farm, and told us we had 2 weeks to move. So anyway, they made us dig a hole 3 feet deep in front of our house, and the sheriff said we had to throw in our cameras and anything to do with Japan. So we threw them all into this hole, and books from Japan, box camera, Kodak, old-fashioned camera, and we buried it. And then they said you can have 2 weeks notice. You got to only carry what you can carry to the train, and you have to meet at this train station. So I said, okay. So they confiscated my father's shotgun, Winchester double barrel shotgun, and another shotgun. And they said, we'll give it back to you when you come back. And we thought, well, we're never going to come back. But anyway, they took my father's gun, and we had to sell a tractor and everything, our pickup truck, our farming equipment, everything. We dumped it. We sold our pickup truck to University of Santa Clara students for $15, and we dumped the tractor and everything. And so he took a big loss. And the ranch was not in his name because he was Japanese. He couldn't own land. But it was in my mother's name because she was born in the United States in San Jose. So the land was in her name. But anyway, when 2 weeks came, we went to the train station and we left everything. We gave everything away to our Caucasian neighbors. They said, well, you can have this, you can have this. So he took a tremendous loss, a Caterpillar tractor, farming equipment, everything. We had a neighbor across the street, Norio Uematsu, who also had to move too. So they farmed across the street there in Campbell. And so we got on the train and they shipped us to Pomona assembly camp. They made us pull the shades down on the train when we got on in San Jose. And all the way we could not look out because we had military police on each car. And when we got up on Pomona, we went to the camp there. It was terrible. But we stayed there a few months, make the story short. And then later on, they said, oh, we're going to move. You're going to go to Wyoming, Heart Mountain, Wyoming. So they put us on a train again, and we had to pull the shades. And every time we passed through a town, they made us pull the shade down. And out in the middle of the desert, we could put the shades up and look at the scenery. So that's what we did all the way through Nevada, Utah. The train went and up toward the northern part of Utah, border of Colorado into Wyoming, and they dropped us off at Wyoming, Heart Mountain, Wyoming. So we got off the train there, and I was in my family and I was in Block 9 over there in Heart Mountain, facing the Heart Mountain, right next to the fence. So my wife, Edie Yamasaki, she was there in Block 30. I didn't know her then, but her family was there. So we, it was terrible. The camp froze to death in there, small dinky room, pot-belly stove. And I remember it was so cold, we almost, shivered to death. Snow and everything. And I recall the school wasn't ready yet. They didn't have the elementary school built yet, so I didn't go to school. So my sister and I, one day, they had guards and searchlights and guns and the whole works and a barbed wire fence right next to us. Then I decided one day, I don't know how I did it, but I did it with my sister and another buddy. We sneaked out of camp while I was there in our Heart Mountain by Block 1, close eastern part of the Heart Mountain. We sneaked out of the camp underneath the barbed wire fence and went through the western shores of the Shoshone River, which is ran right by the camp there, about 2.5, 3 miles away. And we searched on the western shore of the Shoshone River for Indian arrowheads. So we collected a whole bunch of Indian arrowheads and found some beautiful agate rocks. And so we pocketed them and went back to camp. And then all of a sudden, my mother had asked WRA there if we could transfer to Amache, Colorado. And so we didn't think they would do it anyway. But anyway, in December, they said, well, we're going to okay it. You can transfer you and your family to Amache, Colorado. And my mother told them our relatives are all there, Taniguchis and everybody, her brothers and, everybody. So father, mother, etc. And lo and behold, they put us on a train in early January, right after December. And we didn't have to pull the shades, and we went by train. They paid for us. We went all the way through Denver and Colorado Springs and down to Lamar, and they let us off at Amache, Granada, Colorado. And they had a big army truck waiting for us. So they put us on a truck and took us to the headquarters in Amache. And from there, they put us on a truck and assigned us to Block 10E, Room 11B. And it just so happens they did it on purpose because our relatives lived in Block 10E also, in Barrack 2, A and B, a big family, the Taniguchis. So we were kind of fortunate. And there I stayed there until, of course, 1945 when we got out.
We never knew what was going to happen at all. So we got ready to leave, and I remember they let us know that we can catch the bus at our church. Our church was the center of operation for many things that the community did. And so we went to the church and got onto the bus and got sent into Merced. I remember that very clearly. And some gentleman, a dentist, I think, from San Francisco, was also on the bus, and he was the spokesperson. He's a Japanese guy. But I think he must have been Nisei as well. He must have been an older Nisei. And he told us how we were going to be put into the concentration, into the assembly center in Merced, which was at the fairground. And we hadn't gone to the fairground at that stage. We were at the Veterans Hall in Merced. They made that announcement. And then they drove us into the fairground, and then we got assigned our rooms that we were going to have there. There were 7 of us in the family, and so we got one room, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
Yeah, we just got one room. At Merced Assembly Center was a fairground, and it was the racetrack that they had us close to, but they had barracks that were already built. There were a number of what they call wards, and we were put into Ward A, which was the first people, I guess, that went in at that time. And so that's where we were assigned, and that's where we stayed until we got shipped out again. It was, I guess you'd call it sort of a boring life. There was nothing to do, really. As soon as most of the people were there, then they started up some recreational activities. And one of the things they had was at the fairground, at the grandstand, they did have baseball games going on. So we used to go to the baseball game. I was a little too young to be playing with the adults there, but they also had entertainment there. Some of the people within the camp did some entertaining, like singing, and I don't remember her name, but there was one young lady who was a really good singer at the time, and we remember her singing. I'm sure it was "God Bless America." We were there from May until September, and we got sent out in September of 1942. And that's when it took us the 4 days to get there to Amache. There wasn't that much difference as far as I could remember. We had activities that were started right away by the people that were in the camp. And so there was a lot of baseball that was played there in Amache too. They just took the open ground and made baseball fields and played baseball there. I didn't play much baseball, but I played softball with the team. Yeah. That was pretty competitive. We had games against teams out of Sebastopol and that area, and it was pretty competitive having those games. Everybody used to come watch. That's basically life in camp in Amache was not much different than it was in Merced. We used to kids used to get together all the time, and we would tease the little ones and give the younger ones a bad to tease them so much. But basically, it was, well, we just stayed. That's all it was. There's not much doing at the time. I think one of the things that we did was we had church services there because our Livingston community was a Christian church. And so the church service did go on in Amache. One of the services did. One of the things that I remember very clearly is I used to sing in the choir while we were in Livingston. And my sister was a graduate of San Jose State. And she led a choir. It must have had at least 100 voices in it. Everybody that I talked to around here were part of the choir, as well as all the other people. And it was a great, great choir. It ended up. And for Christmas of that first year, the choir sang at the community church that they had. And it was very nice. So that's basically the kind of things that we did while in Amache. They had a high school started pretty late. That high school probably didn't start until about October or November at the earliest. I think it was November when it started. And most of the teachers were, of course, graduate students or students that had completed most of the university work and became teachers for us. And what I remember mostly about that high school, my senior year, was that I didn't learn much of anything. And I didn't realize how bad that was going to be until after the war, when I went on to the University of California at Berkeley and realized how much I had missed in high school because we had no algebra, we had no chemistry, we had no physics, we had none of those courses. So it was sort of a lost year for me. And we did, part of the time during this period of time when we were at Amache, we did, some of us young people, about 17, 18, they were all classmates of mine. We went out to work in Kansas, which was only about 10 miles away. And we went to work for a farmer there. And one of the things we remember so well is that the farmer's wife was such a good cook and the food was so delicious. We remember that very clearly. We were out there chopping beets. And so chopping beets is not a very easy job because you have to grab one beet at a time and chop the green parts off and then throw it into a pile. So that was one of the things that we did while we were there.
When we first heard about, that we had to evacuate, and so what affected me a lot was leaving school, especially the last day that our teacher, in fact, he became our art teacher at the high school. But at that time, he was a sixth grade teacher, Mr. Hull, Gerald Hull. Mm-hmm. And he was so very understanding, very pleasant, he took us out the day before that we were going to leave. And he told us how he felt and how he felt for us, and that he was sorry that something like this had to happen. Mm-hmm. And so at that class, there was two other Japanese Americans, Raymond Merida and Charles Kabochi, those two boys, and myself. There's three of us there. And so then that was the last day, and our friends, it was interesting because they didn't realize what was going to happen to us. And so they just, when we said goodbye, said, "Oh, we'll probably see you, soon." And so then after that, we had to get ready, and my parents and my two brothers, the older two brothers, were in the service already. And so they weren't able to come back and help us out. And so Pete and Frank, Pete was in the first year of the junior college, and then Frank had just graduated from Anley High School. We were able to sell our car. And so the people are the friends of Pete's. And so they took us on that car to the station. So we didn't have to find, other communication to get there. I remember the station when we were leaving. So we must have been sent down by the train. And there, people there, and turned out one of my classmates, her mother was involved in this ladies group, and they made sandwiches for us. And
That's nice.
yeah, I didn't know that until after we were back here after the war, and she happened to mention. I said, "Oh, you're kidding, Mama?" Yeah, she said, "Yeah, she was there." And we were there only for 3 months.
Right.
Yeah, and the only thing was so different was we were in barracks, and so we didn't have a bathroom. We had and in the shower. And I think what was the hardest was for our parents, especially our mothers. They're very modest and have to go into the
latrines, public
latrine, and also latrine. My gosh, over there we had the outhouses at Merced,
right?
And so they would have 3 people going into that outhouse, and at our age, in fact, you go in and sit with your friends. That was something different. But
kind of chat, huh?
Yeah, social. And same thing with the showers. But to me, what really felt sorry for was our parents, the mothers especially, infected us that much because, you're all in there together.
Okay.
And I can't think of anything for our generation. We made friends, we got acquainted. There were. That was kind of interesting for me because once we got there, and like my brothers too, Pete was helping out, and Frank, I don't know what he was doing. He probably might have been helping the volunteer bunch too,
right?
Getting ready to go to Amache.
Okay.
But with us, it was right in the middle of summer. And so we had entertainment at the people in camp, the talented people. We had like a talent show.
A talent show?
Out in the fairgrounds,
Okay.
the bleachers, that sort.
Okay.
So, in the evenings they had something going for us. So we make friends also and go, together. But the 3 months went so fast. It was like a summer vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we didn't really get going until we got to Amache. And then by then they had how would you say? I don't know what. I remember the desks and things. I don't know where they got the desks, but there were more like tables, we shared. And the teachers, I can't remember the teacher. All the ones I remember was the ones that were hired by the government. They went. And especially that one math teacher, she was my algebra teacher, and she was from Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was so difficult to get used to her accent. So we
Oh.
really had.
Oh.
But she was okay.
Mhm.
And then there was the other one that he was. I don't know where. I don't think he was in the service or anything, but something to do with military. So he was
Mhm.
kind of a very strict.
Mhm.
And I remember some of those boys really got it because if they weren't paying attention, he had a ruler.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The memories that I have of Amache or the life there. In the winter, we had, like our barracks were on the other end of the camp. Now, school was way up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to go across between the different blocks to walk up there. There wasn't any transportation. We had to walk up there.
Right.
Remember the dust storms
Oh,
in the
okay.
summer. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And in the winter, we had the snow.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we managed to survive it. But thanks to the Sears and Roebuck catalog,
Yeah.
hall. Each block had a rec hall.
Right.
And they had Sunday school.
Uh-huh.
And so went, and that's when I was very impressed with,
Okay.
well, in fact, that movie of Jesus Christ,
Okay.
things like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they're part, more serious things that we were
Mhm.
exposed to.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Welcome back, everybody. Ken, I was wondering if you could start by telling us the story of the tarantula and the centipedes.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't know. More people, when I went to visit Amache, they wanted to hear more about that than my actual life in camp. It must have been fascinating. But anyway, we didn't have much to play with, so a bunch of us boys decided to sneak out of the camp, and the guards are very, very lenient. There's nowhere you can go. It's in the middle of nowhere. So they let us out, and they used to even wave us when I used to sneak underneath the barbed wire. And I go, Block 10A faced the field there and Wolf Creek. So I used to sneak out with my buddies, and we used to go hunting for animals. And we were pretty successful. We used to catch kangaroo rats. Sometimes we'd catch a small rattlesnake, but our favorite was catching tarantulas and big centipedes. And then we get a big mayonnaise jar or some kind of jar from the mess hall where we ate, and then we put them in the jar, and then we would kind of guess who would win the fight between the centipede and the tarantula in the same big jar. And so we all picked the tarantula because, you've seen their fangs, they're huge and very poisonous. So, as soon as they put them together, then the centipede and the tarantula started fighting, and the centipede was so quick. Centipedes are about 6 inches long. And boy, they'd attack the tarantula from the head and the body and kill them. And they'd start eating the tarantula. And they say, oh, gosh, we guessed wrong. We all picked a tarantula to win. And we did it 2 or 3 more times, and each time the centipede would win. So, okay, that was one thing. We used to catch kangaroo rats and trying to make pets out of them. They made bad pets, so we let them go. Box turtles, which are very common, even inside the camp, they used to roam. And they made good pets, but they're slow, and what kind of pet they are. They don't react like dogs and cats, so we didn't play too much with them. We used to catch other kind of insects, and one of them I remember was the 17-year locust. They had another name for it. They used to come out from the ground after 17 years, and then they develop these wings, and they get bigger than your thumb, the body. And we used to catch them because when they get out and they started becoming large enough, and they would start sending out mating calls, and they would holler wee all day long. And so we would place them and we would catch them, and we used to get sewing thread about 5, 6, 7 feet long, and we tie them around the body below the wings, and we used to toss them up and let them swing around, and then see if they would crash into each other. We had different locusts, so they call them cicadas. I don't know whether it's true or not. They come out every 17 years, so that's what they told us. That was kind of fun. The other thing we used to do, we used to catch other small spiders, but they were very uninteresting. Lizard, they were all right. We could catch, some other kind of insects, but they were no fun. So we'd go walking down to Wolf Creek, which ran on the west side of Block 10E, and you come down the hill and you see the big Wolf River, which ran all the way to Granada, Colorado town, just on the edge, and went all the way to the Arkansas River. Well, we went in there one day, 3 of us, and we started to wade in there with a lined with cottonwoods, and all of a sudden this huge turtle stuck his head out and started going like that. And we got scared, and boy, we jumped out of the water and we went to the shoreline. And the turtle, I swear to God, must be 2 feet long, huge turtle. And we found out later on, the camp people told us they were snapping turtles. And so, he said, yeah, you don't want to mess with them. So we never went back into the creek and waded anymore. We always walked on the edge. And one of the things we did was we had a gunny sack. We heard they catch fish over there in the Arkansas River. So we got gunny sacks from the mess hall, and we follow the river all the way down and up to the town of Amache. And before it went through Amache, we cut across the field and go straight toward the Arkansas River. And we go over there and we trap these big carps about 2 feet long, huge carps, and these rock pools. And we used to catch 3 or 4 of them at a time, big one, put them in a gunny sack, bring them back, and then give them to the chef, and they'd cook it. And we figured they would share with us, but they never did. They all ate it up themselves, and they never shared anything. So we quit giving them the fish from then on. My father used to say, well, what happened to the fish? He wanted to eat some of it. I said, well, the cooks kept them all, and they ate them all. So we stopped doing that, but that was kind of fun. I had some questions of Sherman and Margaret both. I wonder if they remember who their teacher was in high school in Amache. What teacher's name? I remember my teacher's name, Mrs. Sievert. She was my sophomore teacher, and I'm just wondering if Margaret remembers the name of her high school teacher in Amache. Can you find out? Yeah.
I can try and find out. She didn't come with us. She's not on the panel with us, but perhaps Sherman remembers his teachers.
Yeah, I remember after 70-something years, I remember my teacher's name, Mrs. Sievers. Mrs. Gladys Sievers. She was my sophomore teacher in Amache. I was in a sophomore class, taking a class from her. And believe it or not, I'm a professional educator. I've been in education for almost 40 years now, teaching science, chemistry, biology, and photography and art. So I've been doing a lot of teaching. I'm retired now, but Mrs. Sievers, out of about 50, as far as I know, if this is true, out of 50-something educators in Amache camp, she was the only teacher that kept boxes of material. And one day I was helping Whitney Peterson, who is a student from Denver University, working for Bonnie Clark, the archaeologist, who studies the camp every other year, doing archaeology work. She found one box from Mrs. Sievers. Oh, so I was surprised. I said, can I look through it? And I went in there and I found the grade books in there with my grades, grades for all the kids in my class. And I'm just wondering if Sherman or Margaret was in my class also, whether they were in the same class. But anyway, I kept looking through there and I found pictures of us, classroom pictures, my Taniguchi people in the class and different classes. And Whitney Peterson went back and looked in the archives and they found 4 more boxes from Mrs. Sievert. She had 5 huge boxes and she donated it all to the Amache Museum. Of course, she's gone. She lived in Lamar, and she really commuted all the way to teach at Amache, the class I took at Amache. And I went through all the stuff, and I even found Taniguchi, my cousin Ned's compositions and grade books and everything. Astounding. And no other teacher did that. 5 boxes, and she had newspaper clippings, principal messages, WRA messages from the director of the camp, superintendents, one newspaper article that I found in her archives that said, from Colorado Springs newspaper, it said, "Japs are coming." It had a headline, and she cut it out and she put it in her box. And I found 2 more. Japanese are leaving camp. Another one about the camp and how they were working. But that one surprised me, and no one has ever seen it before. Colorado newspaper saying Japs are coming. And I read the article, so I can reproduce that and I can give it to you people later on. And part of the camp is very fascinating.
So Sherman, do you remember your high school teachers at Amache?
I was just my senior year, and I don't remember the teachers at all. I just remember one ag teacher that we have, but I can't remember his name anymore. And I don't remember teachers that taught other courses, actually, in Amache. I don't think we had too many teachers teaching us, because I sure don't remember much about the high school year in Amache itself.
Sherman, did your parents ever want to go back to see the camp after camp?
My parents?
Yeah, your parents.
No, my father died shortly after they came back. He didn't stay alive very long. My mother lived many years later, but she never expressed a desire to go back to camp. And we went back to the first big reunion that they had in Amache. And we also had a big reunion in San Francisco. But I don't remember too much about them. It's too long ago.
Yeah. What was your feeling, Sherman, when you went back to that Amache reunion, the one that was a pilgrimage at the actual camp?
I found it very interesting. We were able to identify the actual blocks where we lived. We lived on 9H, 9H7E, which was the 7A, was it? I think, which was to the side a little bit, to the west end of the camp. And basically, I was surprised at how much there were trees in the place there, because I was only there for about a year and a half. And so I don't remember things about Amache during the period where most of the people were there. So my remembrance of Amache is not that great, actually.
Yeah.
It wasn't the greatest place by any means, though.
So Ken, when you went back to the field school, you said, and so how did you feel about your visit back at Amache?
What was the question? How do you feel about your visit? How do you feel about your visit? Oh, how do I feel about my visit back in 2018?
Yeah.
I went to help with my cousin. My younger son's Greg Kitajima. He talked me into. I didn't want to go because I felt I was too old to do anything. But my younger son's kid, Greg Kitajima, talked me into going. So I flew over there to Denver, and we rented a car and we drove down to Amache and helped out with the museum and helped Bonnie Clark over there with the archaeology project. So I went to the museum, and I was in the Boy Scouts, and so I was looking to the museum, and I saw a picture of me in the museum at Mesa Verde National Park, and I said, "Oh, that's me." And I said, "Gee, where's the one about Two Buttes? We went there too." and they didn't know what Two Buttes was. So, when I was in a Boy Scout, we went to Two Buttes as a Boy Scout, which was 20 miles south of Lamar, way in the boondocks. After we had to drive from Amache to Lamar, and then 20 more miles to Two Buttes Reservoir. That's where we passed our swimming test in a lake over there. And the Boy Scouts made us swim, I think, about 50 yards to get our badge. And they had no record of it. So I said, well, you guys heard about Two Buttes? No. This is all. So they added that to the museum, which I was happy because it was missing. And they had a couple other things missing. When I drove through Amache camp with my kids and my wife in 1980, many, many years ago, way before John Hopper and Bonnie, Clark started working, I went through the camp and I found a katana by the co-op. I was walking around, I found some turtles, and I found this katana, Japanese, with a hole in the Japanese used to use to cut. And then I found a big side, and I brought it home with some chimney parts and everything back to San Jose after the trip. But I left it out in the yard, and one day Dana Shu from Sonoma State College wanted to interview me. So I showed her the stuff. I found this in camp. I says, I was going to throw it away. Oh, no, don't throw it away. That's a rare item. And let me do research. So Dana Shu did research on the big sign I found there in camp, partly buried, a big one about a third like this with no handle, of course, the handle was missing. And she said that was made in 1856 in Albany, New York. I said, well, how did it get to Amache camp? I said, I found the camp. I said, well, most likely they were using to cut corn and vegetables and everything, and somebody just brought it in there and just buried it, left it there. Oh, okay. So anyway, I donated that to the museum, and they were happy to get it. So that's there now. The size from Japan, katana, I don't know what you call it. It's small, but this one with a little handle, and we used to use the Japanese used to use it to cut weeds and things. So anyway, I remember that a very outstanding, incident. But what I was shocked because when I went there in 1980, it was nothing but weeds and all kinds of animals roaming around and cacti and everything, and we had to be careful how we walked around in 1980 through the camp. The roads were still dirt road, and I said, okay. I collected materials, stuck it in my camp and my SUV, and went back to San Jose, and I did it. So the rest of the story. Fantastic. Lot of history in Amache, and I personally think Amache affected me in the long run. I think about it and all the prejudice I faced there right after Amache got out. And I went to high school and graduated high school, and then I joined the U.S. Air Force a few years later in 1950 during the Korean War. So I served during the Korean War and went to Texas, and boy, did I face a lot of prejudice. They didn't like Japanese back in 1950. And I went through training there at Lackland Air Force Base and then Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas. And while I was there, they didn't like Japanese there either. So I got my training as a surgical nurse in the operating room. So I worked as a nurse in the operating room helping with surgery. Korean wounded, they shipped in from Japan, Korea to Japan, and then to Travis Air Force Base or Hamilton, then from there to Laurie Air Force Base Hospital, where I was stationed in the hospital there. And we treated the wounded. There in Denver, I faced some prejudice. They didn't let me play on the golf course there when I was, even in uniform, U.S. Air Force uniform. But I joined the JACL there, and I donated blood and I contributed as much as I can. And I experienced some real prejudice when they asked for a volunteer, and Dr. Cleveland, the chief of surgery, asked me if I want to go back to Wichita Falls, Shepherd Air Force Base, and get training for a portable, non-portable respirator instructor. So I said, yeah, I'll go. and I rode a B-25 bomber in the turret. And I rode there, and I got off the bomber and went to the training field over there at Shepherd Air Force Base, and my ears were ringing like crazy. I couldn't hear me, and boy, I had a terrible time. But while I was there getting training as a portable, non-portable respirator instructor and going back to Lowry and be a teacher there, also work in surgery, I decided while I'm there to go to Dallas, Texas State Fair and participate over there and see what's going on. So I got on the bus at Wichita Falls while I was getting training and took walked back to the end of the bus there to go 110 miles to Dallas. And the last 4 rows was only empty seats. So I went back to sit back down there, and this big Texan came by on the bus and said, "Hey, you can't sit back there." I said, "Well, why can't I? There's no other seats." I said, "That's only for blacks." I said, "Oh, I didn't know that. It's the law." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." So I had to stand holding onto the thing and stood 110 miles all the way to Dallas, Texas. In the meantime, we stopped at one of the towns to go to the Benjo, restroom. And I walked to the restroom after I got off the bus, and they said, "Hey, you can't go into that restroom. That's for blacks only." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't." And the faucet is only for black. I said, "You can use the other one." And they had separate, facilities for black. And I got off the bus anyway at Dallas, Texas, and I got there early, and I walked downtown, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to go visit the nice big store." So I went toward downtown. I went to Neiman Marcus, a big store there, and I started to walk in, and the doorman said, "Hey, no, you can't go in there." I was in U.S. uniform. I said, "It doesn't make any difference." He said, "No, they can't. You can't go in there." And so I knew why, because I was Japanese. I said, "Okay." So I walked by and I killed some time, and I went to the Texas State Fair, and I finished over there. But I learned my lesson. I said, so I finished the state fair, and I got on the bus early, so I make sure I got a seat right away. I don't have to sit in the last 4 rows. So I made it back to Texas, Shepherd Air Force Base for a complete training. But even there, I went to a restaurant with Caucasian friends at Shepherd Air Force Base where I was getting training, and we went down there in uniform, and he said, "Hey, we don't serve Japs." So all my Caucasian friends said, "Okay, we won't eat here either." So we ate somewhere else. But they're highly prejudiced against Japanese. Today, they're not. It's just the opposite. They welcome Japanese. What a change. And why, I found out, because the 442nd Infantry saved the Japanese Texas Battalion from being annihilated by the Germans. And so they respect, the Japanese there. So it's really nice.
Yeah.
How to change.
Yeah, that was good. So Sherman, if you'll kind of take that story from there and talk a little bit, because I know you were in Amache for a while and then went into the Army. So, and you went in to be a part of the MIS. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experiences there.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. After high school, which was a very short high school, I graduated in my senior year in June of 1943, and while I was just about that time, they had come in to recruit for the 442nd, and many of my friends volunteered and signed up and went into the 442nd, and I was not 18 at that time yet when the recruiters came in, so I did not volunteer at that stage. But shortly thereafter, the Army sent recruiters once again for MIS, and I don't know how they allowed me to go in with them, but I did have a few Japanese lessons while I was home, but not very much. We used to go Saturday to school, Japanese school on Saturdays for half a day, but that was more play than school, and our local parents were teachers. So I didn't know much Japanese, but they did accept me to go into MIS. And in November of 1943, I was sent to Camp Savage in Minnesota, where the MISLS school was, and that's when I started the lessons in Japanese. At Camp Savage, during that period of time, they had classes for 6 months for those people who knew Japanese quite well, and 9 months for those that did not know much Japanese. And I was in the 9-month class. And there were others who were in the 9-month class too. I remember very clearly about in November, it was right after I had gotten into Camp Savage that they sent a group from Hawaii to become students at Camp Savage as well. And I remember them coming into Minnesota. It was already cold by then. I don't know if it was snowing or not, but they came in wearing these long overcoats that dragged on the ground. They came from Hawaii, and they were cold. I remember that very clearly. And after that, I became good friends with the Hawaiian kids. I went through the 9-month class, and there were Hawaiian kids in that 9-month class as well. But they knew Japanese pretty well because they went to school every day after their regular school to learn Japanese, which they did in some communities in California as well, but not in our town. And so they were much more proficient in Japanese than some of us who were there. I had gone in with a little bit elder guy. He must have been in his high 20s. He was recruited, and he came to the camp. I don't remember him staying very long in the camp. And I remember him being a former member of a Japanese baseball team in Japan, and he was from LA. I saw him after the war, but he had to be a gardener to make enough money to exist in California after the war, and I lost touch of him after that. Anyway, after being in the camp for 9 months to learn the language, we got sent to basic training in Alabama. We went to Fort McClellan in Alabama to take basic training. We took basic training there for, I guess it was about 3 months. And I got, just before they returned to Minnesota, I got ill and I got left behind. And so I stayed in Fort McClellan for a month or two later and had to do latrine duty to stay there for a while. Anyway, I finally got sent back to Minnesota. By then, they had shifted the camp to Fort Snelling from Camp Savage, because Camp Savage was a very small encampment. So they had to have more room because they were recruiting a lot of Japanese people for the language school. And interestingly enough, during this period of time, they also had schools for Caucasian people in the University of Denver as well as the University of Michigan. A 2-year course to learn Japanese. And when they graduated from the 2-year course, they received gold bars on their shoulders. They became second lieutenants. And so that's the kind of thing that happened. Those of us who graduated out of the language school, if we came out of the school, if we were fortunate, we became corporals. But that was as high as they placed those of us who went to the language school in Camp Savage and Snelling. Much later, I didn't get sent overseas until 1945, after being in the service, and I got sent out of San Francisco. I remember very clearly the Golden Gate Bridge vanishing as we went back and forth all the way to the Philippines to get to the Philippines, and I was there, and it took us a month to get to the Philippines from San Francisco because we went back and forth, supposedly getting away from the Japanese submarines. So after a number of weeks in the Philippines, you know, the war ended in August of 1945 when the atom bomb was dropped. After that, shortly after that, they put us on a ship and we went into Yokohama to be stationed in Tokyo. And I remember very clearly in Tokyo, on the train going from Yokohama to Tokyo, most of the buildings were gone because of the bombing that was done and the fire bombs that were dropped in Tokyo. And can you hear me?
Better.
And they said that there were more people that died in the firebombing of Tokyo than they were killed in Hiroshima during the atom bomb. So it was really a place where there was hardly any more buildings in Tokyo. I do remember one thing though. In Tokyo, the people were starting to clean up the mess that was there, all the burnt stuff they were hauling away with wheelbarrows and things and getting rid of it. In the Philippines, and we were in the Philippines for about a month and a half. That was also bombed in Manila, and that place had debris all over the place. But in the Philippines, there were never anybody cleaning up the debris that was there from the bombings and things. I noticed that very vividly because I figured it was because the Philippines is a little hot. So people just didn't have the energy to clean up like they did in Tokyo. So that's some of the things I saw at that time. We got stationed right in the heart of Tokyo, and that's where we worked out. We had a language group called ATIS there, the Allied Translating Interpreting Section, and from there we were sent out to do some translating, but I was sent out very little. We did some translating of some documents, but not too much. Didn't do very much in Tokyo. We got along very well with the Japanese people because we spoke the language and we looked just like the rest of them. So that was interesting being there. In the end, I got assigned to a British major who was who was supposed to investigate the Black Dragon Society, and I went with him to interview the head of the society. I don't remember too much about the interview. I probably didn't understand very much of it. And they served us tea, but the British major would not touch a drop of tea because he was afraid he was going to get poisoned. It was interesting how scared he was as far as the Japanese people were concerned. So that was rather interesting to see. And I worked in MacArthur's headquarters in the Daiichi building. I was on the bottom floor. I used to watch MacArthur walk in every morning about 9:30 in the morning with his corncob pipe and all. And so that was interesting as well. That's the kind of thing that I did while I was in the service. I had enough points to get out in 1946. So I came home back to California, got out of the service, and then in the fall, I went back to college at Berkeley. And that's when I found out that I had learned so little in my senior year at Amache that I had the first 2 years at Berkeley. That's sort of the history that I had of the military service that I had.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank you both to Ken Kitajima, who comes to us from San Jose, Sherman Kishi, who comes to us from Livingston. Thank you for telling us your stories and documenting. It was an absolute pleasure for me to talk with both of you. And my name is Diane Honda, and I'm from Fresno. So it was good to see everyone.
You have any time for
I
about
think so.
1 minute or less?
Okay.
I have some news for you. Very quickly. This just came in a newspaper about a week ago on the 17th, and it seems like Congress is going to vote on the Great American Outdoors
Yeah.
Act. Did you hear about that? Yeah, and they're going to set aside the Senate and the House of Representatives okayed it, and Trump said he'll sign it. $9.5 billion over the next 5 years to repair American national parks, and they're setting aside quite a bit of money. So let's hope that it's already signed by Trump. I don't know. I didn't. That's a lot of money.
No, that will be very good. Yes, that will be very good. Thank you. That's very good news for Amache, and hope, yeah, he signs that. So thank you again, both of you, very much. And thank you for the audience that is listening.